The forest surrounding the small Mexican village of San Miguel de las Flores had always been a place of mystery. Locals spoke of strange lights dancing between the trees at night and the whispers of invisible children calling out to passers-by. But when 25 people disappeared within a single night, the whispers turned into screams. It began with a fiesta. The entire village had gathered to celebrate the feast of San Miguel. Music echoed through the cobblestone streets, and laughter filled the warm evening air. Yet, by dawn, a grim silence hung over San Miguel. More than half the villagers were gone, leaving no sign of struggle or explanation, only abandoned belongings and the faint scent of damp earth lingering in the air. The survivors, too terrified to search the forest, called for outside help. That's when I was summoned, a detective with a reputation for solving cases that defied logic. When I arrived, the village was a ghost of its former self. The remaining townsfolk eyed me warily as I made my way through the plaza. The vibrant papal picado decorations from the fiesta hung limp, now macabre reminders of the vanished. The mayor, Don Ignacio, met me outside the church. His face was pale, and his hands shook as he recounted the events. The Chaneques, he whispered, his voice barely audible. They've taken them. Chaneques, mischievous spirits of the forest, protectors of nature who, legend said, punished those who disrespected their domain. But punishments usually involve tricks or stolen items, not entire villages. We need them back, Ignacio said, his desperation evident. Whatever the cost. I began my investigation with the abandoned homes. Inside, meals lay half-eaten, chairs toppled, as though the occupants had left in haste. One house had claw marks on its wooden doorframe, marks that didn't match any known animal. In another home, I found a strange doll made of twigs and bound with red thread. Its head was a stone with a single spiral carved into it. It emanated a faint but undeniable energy. Following the forest's edge, I found footprints leading into the dense undergrowth. Strangely, the prints weren't just human. Among them were tiny, childlike tracks that appeared and vanished sporadically, as if their owners had been skipping through the woods. The locals begged me not to enter the forest after sundown, but time wasn't a luxury I could afford. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I ventured in, armed with a flashlight, protective talismans, and the doll I'd found. The deeper I went, the stranger the forest became. The trees twisted unnaturally, their branches forming archways that seemed deliberate. The air grew thick, making each breath feel like a struggle. My flashlight flickered, the beam weak against the oppressive darkness. Then, I heard it, a giggle, faint and childlike, coming from all around me. The giggling led me to a glade bathed in an eerie blue light. In the center stood a large stone altar, covered in spirals and symbols I didn't recognize. Around it were small offerings, coins, fruit, and flowers. The scent of copal incense lingered, mixing with the damp earth. As I stepped closer, the laughter stopped, replaced by a low hum. The altar pulsed faintly, as if alive. I placed the twig doll on its surface, hoping to draw out whatever force lingered here. Suddenly, the forest erupted with sound, whispers, cries, and the rustling of leaves. Shadows flitted between the trees, too fast to follow. I stood my ground, gripping a talisman tightly, but fear gnawed at me. The shadows coalesced into forms, small, humanoid figures with glowing eyes. They encircled me, their laughter now sharp and mocking. One stepped forward, no taller than my waist, its body a strange mix of bark, moss, and flesh. "You trespass," it hissed, its voice layered with a dozen others. "Why do you come?" I held up the doll. "I'm here for the villagers. Return them." The Chaneque tilted its head, studying me. "They took from us. Now, we take from them." "What did they take?" I demanded. The creature's grin widened, revealing jagged teeth. "Life." The Chaneques vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving me alone in the glade. I examined the altar more closely, noticing fresh blood smeared across its surface. Nearby, the ground was littered with broken offerings and snapped branches. The villagers must have angered the spirits by desecrating their sacred site. But why had the Chaneques taken such extreme measures? As I pondered, the ground beneath me trembled. A deep, guttural growl echoed from the forest, far too large for the small spirits I had encountered. The Chaneques weren't acting alone. Something else was in the woods, something much worse. I returned to the village at dawn, shaken but alive. Don Ignacio was waiting for me at the church, his face grim. "Did you find them?" "Not yet," I admitted. "But the forest is alive with something ancient. The villagers must have done something to provoke the Chaneques." Ignacio hesitated, then led me to the church's confession booth. Inside, a single page from an old journal lay on the seat. It spoke of a group of men who had ventured into the forest weeks before the fiesta, chopping down sacred trees to build a new market stall. They thought the stories were just that, stories, Ignacio said. Now we pay the price. That night, I returned to the forest, prepared to negotiate. I carried offerings of my own, candles, herbs, and polished obsidian stones, and approached the altar again. The Chaneques appeared, their glowing eyes filled with malice. "You seek to bargain?" "Yes," I said firmly. "What will it take to bring the villagers back?" One of them stepped forward, larger than the rest. "A soul for a soul. The forest must remain balanced." Before I could answer, a low voice rumbled from the darkness. "Enough," it commanded, sending the Chaneques scurrying back into the shadows. The growl from before returned, now accompanied by heavy footsteps. My heart raced as a towering figure emerged, a creature that looked like a living tree, its face a mass of twisting roots. It stared at me with glowing amber eyes. The towering creature regarded me with an almost regal presence, its voice deep and resonant like the groan of ancient wood. "You are not one of them," it said. "Yet you speak for them. Why?" "I seek their return," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the weight of its presence. The arbiter leaned closer, the faint scent of sap and decay filling the air. "The villagers broke the pact. They spilled life and took from the sacred grove. Balance demands retribution." I held up the offerings I had brought. "What can I offer to restore balance? To bring them back?" It paused, as though considering. "The Chaneques crave light, the essence of life itself. Offer your own, and I will release them." I hesitated. The arbiter's terms were clear, but the cost was steep, my soul, or perhaps something worse. "If I give my light, what will become of me?" The arbiter's amber eyes gleamed. "You will belong to the forest, neither dead nor alive. A protector, like the Chaneques, but bound forever to this place." The Chaneques emerged from the shadows, their childlike grins now sharper, hungrier. "Give it to us," they whispered in unison, their voices a haunting melody. But I wasn't ready to surrender. "What if I restore the grove they destroyed?" I asked. "Would that balance the scales?" The arbiter straightened, towering above me. "Restore the grove, and I will consider." The arbiter directed me to the grove the villagers had desecrated. It was deep in the forest, a place where the trees grew unnaturally tall and thick, their roots intertwining to form intricate patterns. When I arrived, the damage was clear, trees lay felled, their stumps still losing sap. The ground was littered with discarded branches and debris, the energy of the place dull and lifeless. Using tools borrowed from the village, I began to restore the grove. I replanted saplings, cleared the debris, and performed rituals I had learned from studying Mesoamerican traditions. The Chaneques watched from the shadows, their expressions unreadable. As I worked, the forest seemed to resist me. Branches snapped underfoot, and whispers filled the air, accusing and mocking. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, always just out of reach. At one point, the whispers turned into cries, and I saw a vision of the villagers. They were trapped in a strange liminal space, their bodies partially transparent, their faces etched with fear. "Help us, Clara," a young girl among the missing, pleaded. Her voice echoed as if underwater. The vision faded, leaving me shaken but determined. The next morning, I returned to the grove to find my work undone. The saplings I had planted were uprooted, their roots blackened, and the altar I had restored was desecrated with claw marks. Who did this? I shouted into the forest. A Chaneque appeared, smaller than the others, its face twisted in guilt. "Not us," it murmured. "One of your kind. Someone from the village was sabotaging my efforts." "But why?" Back in the village, I confronted Don Ignacio, showing him the damaged grove. His face darkened, and he shook his head. "I told them to leave it alone." "Who?" I pressed. "Alvaro," he said reluctantly. "He's stubborn, thinks the forest is cursed and we're better off without those who disappeared." Alvaro was a hot-headed rancher who had lost a brother to the forest years ago. When I found him, he was sharpening a machete, his expression hard. "They're gone," he said bluntly. "Why risk more lives for them?" I warned him to stay away from the forest, but his defiance was clear. That night, I dreamt of the Arbiter. In my dream, it loomed over the village, its amber eyes burning with anger. "The grove remains defiled," it growled. "Your time runs short." I woke to find the twig doll glowing faintly, its spiral markings pulsing with a rhythmic light. The forest was calling me back, and this time, I felt a growing urgency. I returned to the grove and caught Alvaro in the act, chopping at the roots of a tree with his machete. "What are you doing?" I yelled. "Saving the rest of us," he spat. "The forest doesn't care about us. It only takes." Before I could stop him, a Chaneque appeared, its eyes blazing with anger. It let out a shriek that pierced the air, and Alvaro froze, his body stiffening unnaturally. The Chaneque looked at me, its expression a mix of fury and sadness. "The balance is fragile," it hissed. "Fix this, or all will be lost." I carried Alvaro's unconscious body back to the village. He was alive but unresponsive, as though trapped in a dream. The Arbiter appeared that evening, its voice echoing through the plaza. "Your kind continues to offend. There will be no more warnings." I pleaded for more time, promising to restore the grove and ensure the villagers respected the forest's boundaries. "You have until the next moonrise," it said, before vanishing into the shadows. I rallied the villagers, explaining the gravity of the situation. Reluctantly, they joined me in the forest, working together to restore the grove. They brought offerings, performed rituals, and begged forgiveness from the spirits. The Chaneques watched silently, their expressions softening as the grove began to heal. The oppressive energy lifted slightly, but the Arbiter had not yet returned. As the moon rose, the Arbiter appeared once more, its massive form emerging from the shadows. It inspected the grove, running its clawed fingers over the restored trees and the altar. "This is not enough," it said. "A final offering is required." "What kind of offering?" I asked. The Arbiter pointed to the twig doll in my hand. "Her light must be returned to the forest." I held the twig doll in my hands, its faint glow pulsing with the rhythm of a heartbeat. The Arbiter's demand hung heavy in the air, its meaning unmistakable: the essence of Clara Dawson, contained within this doll, must be returned to the forest for the balance to be restored. Around me, the villagers who had gathered gasped in horror. Clara's mother, Rosalia, stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "You can't take her again," she cried. "She's just a child." The Arbiter's amber eyes flickered with something akin to pity, but its voice remained unwavering. "She belongs to the forest now. Her soul was taken to appease the Chaneques. If she is not returned, the balance will never hold, and the forest will claim more." Rosalia turned to me, her eyes brimming with desperation. "There has to be another way. Please, find another way. But as I looked at the doll, I felt Clara's presence within it. Her voice whispered faintly in my mind, "It's okay. Let me go." I knew the choice would haunt me for the rest of my life, but it had to be made. "Clara," I said softly, clutching the doll. "If I return you, will it bring peace? Will you be free?" Her voice was faint but clear. "Yes. They're scared too, Elric. They just want to protect their home." The Arbiter extended its massive hand, the bark-like skin creaking as its clawed fingers unfurled. "Place her here, and I will honor the pact," it said. Rosalia sobbed as I approached the Arbiter, the doll feeling heavier with each step. I turned back to the villagers. "This isn't the forest's fault. We disrespected it. But we have a chance to make things right." With trembling hands, I placed the doll into the Arbiter's palm. The air grew thick with energy, the spirals on the doll glowing bright before shattering into fragments of light. The light from the doll expanded, flooding the grove with a brilliance that made the trees glow as if lit from within. The Chaneques emerged from the shadows, their small forms now softer and less menacing. They gathered around the Arbiter, their eyes reflecting gratitude. The figures of the 25 missing villagers began to appear one by one, their translucent forms materializing near the altar. They were pale and weak but alive, as if they had been sleeping for months. Clara's figure appeared last, her hand resting on the Arbiter's claw. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carrying through the grove. Her form flickered, then dissolved into the light, which surged into the restored grove and disappeared into the earth. The Arbiter stepped back, its towering form beginning to fade. "The pact is honored," it said, its voice quieter now. "Guard this balance, or next time, nothing will return." The walk back to San Miguel was somber. The returned villagers were dazed, their memories fractured. They spoke of strange dreams, of a place between worlds filled with laughter and shadows. Clara's mother held on to the empty doll, clutching it as if it still contained a piece of her daughter. When we reached the village, the mood shifted to one of cautious joy. Families reunited, tears flowed freely, and the plaza once again filled with the sounds of life. Don Ignacio approached me as I packed my things. "How can we ever thank you?" he asked. "Keep your promises to the forest," I replied. "Offer your respect, and teach your children the cost of forgetting." He nodded solemnly. "We'll never forget this. I swear it." As I left San Miguel, the forest seemed different. The oppressive weight that had once hung over it was gone, replaced by a quiet stillness. Yet, as I crossed the boundary into open fields, I felt a presence watching me. That night, at a small inn far from the forest, I unpacked my belongings and found something unexpected. The twig doll had returned, its spiral faintly glowing once more. A note scratched into the wood read, "Remember, the forest sees all." The Chaneques had accepted the pact, but they had not forgotten. The balance had been restored, but it was a fragile piece. The forest would not tolerate another transgression, and neither would its spirits. As I stared at the doll, I thought of Clara's voice, her bravery in the face of the inevitable. Her sacrifice was not just for her village but a warning for us all. Some forces are older and deeper than we can comprehend, and they demand our respect. Would I return to such a forest if called again? As a detective of the strange and supernatural, I knew the answer was yes. But as I drifted into a restless sleep, the laughter of the Chaneques echoed faintly in my dreams. The forest would always remember.